I see business really as just another adventure. Like you go on this little adventure, you pick people to go with you, you have sort of a direction of where you're going, and you sort of go through that adventure, and it's just sort of a fun way to live. This life is just one adventure after another, and if you can do that for a living, like why wouldn't you?
Welcome to The Ground Up, the podcast where we delve into the inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and their journey to build successful startups. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, and in each episode, I'll sit down with the founders to learn about their experiences, the challenges they face, the lessons they've learned, and the insights they gain as they turn their dreams into reality. Today, we're going to share the exciting story of Stephan Aarstol, the founder of Tower Paddleboards, and how his appearance on Shark Tank changed his world forever. Stephan's story is a testament to the power of resilience, adaptability, and passion. It's about seeing potential, seizing opportunities, and having the determination to succeed even when the odds seem stacked against you. Now, as Tower Paddleboards continues to grow, he has expanded the business into electric bikes, events, and much more. Stephan Aarstol remains committed to providing quality products that improve people's lives while staying true to the core values that made the company a success. Okay, Stephan Aarstol is here with us today. Stephan, thanks for joining. We have a podcast really about startup founders and your story and what that experience has been like, but more importantly, why you do it. And many people have various reasons for doing it, but we'll dive in and get into your story. And, as a company ourselves, we work with organizations from San Francisco to New York with founders, and we hear their stories and what made them become entrepreneurs. So I guess before I dive in and talk about your company, Tower, tell us a little bit, Stephan, about you. What early experiences helped you shape yourself into becoming an entrepreneur?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Jake. So I guess early experiences, my dad was an optometrist, which is kind of half a doctor, half an entrepreneur, and just sort of seeing him run the office and sort of have a flexible schedule. That was definitely one influence. And then, my mom was a banker, so I saw sort of the other. She was sort of working underneath people, especially as, a female in the banking industry, really not getting her due. And so I think seeing both those things just sort of pinpointed to me that, owning your own business is probably a pretty good idea. But I also saw my dad struggle with things for years. He probably could have made more money doing other stuff, struggled for years, and then he sort of leapfrogged, everybody else. So that's kind of the experience I had as a kid. And then also, I was kind of, I guess you would say, an adventurous kid, and always sort of somewhat of a thrill seeker, I guess. And I see business really as just another adventure, right? Like you go on this little adventure, you pick people to go with you, you have sort of a direction of where you're going, and you sort of go through that adventure, and it's just sort of a fun way to live. This life is just one adventure after another, and if you can do that for a living, like why wouldn't you? Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, there's a lot of adventure. There's also some risks and a lot of rewards if you do it the right way. Lots of left and right decisions to make, and it's what makes it, I think, it exciting, but also the journey itself has many episodes as you go through it. You have your company today, Tower, and we'll get into that. But prior to Tower, walk me through a little bit about what prepared you for that. Where did you start off in getting into online sales and digital marketing, and how did that come about? Yeah, so I graduated. I was a bartender after college, and I was making good money while, bartending through college. And I couldn't just go to a regular job because I'd have to cut my salary in half. But then at some point I realized, I don't really want to be a 50-year-old bartender. So I went to grad school. I mean, really for no other reason than that, because my first job out of college, they were paying me $8 an hour, and I was just like, this is insane. I can't even pay my rent. And so I went to graduate school, and immediately, they just doubled your salary. Just they thought you knew more, and I really had an undergraduate business. I learned nothing in grad school, but they doubled my salary. So I'm like, well, that's great. But it was very good timing. So I graduated from college in 1996, and then I graduated from grad school in 1999. And they were basically, handing out internet jobs in 1999 with your graduate degree. So that's where I started. I started with this company called antmini.com. It was a portal for the radiology community at that time, and portals were the big thing then. And we basically, with a small team, went from sort of upstart to like dominant industry leader in a period of about 2 or 3 years. And so I saw the early stages of sort of the internet and the idea that everything tends towards monopoly. And all of a sudden you're going to have a few companies that run the entire world. It was very obvious to me because we were nothing, nobody in medical imaging, and all of a sudden, we took over from these companies that had been around forever. So that's where I really cut my teeth. I was in that job for about 5 years, and then I started on the side. I started a poker chip business, selling high-end poker chips to consumers that have a poker game in their garage. And after about a year of that, it was making more in my side business than I was in my regular company. And so I said, I jumped ship and went off on my own, and that was 2004.
So going from working at a company, like a lot of entrepreneurs do, and then you have an idea that comes up and you start thinking, maybe I can make something happen on my own, or maybe I should take a risk, or maybe just a side hustle where you start making a few extra bucks, and then it starts to turn into something more than your current career. It's a choice you have to make. It's probably not always easy. You take a little bit of a risk, but if you're young enough, maybe it's easier. How did you identify poker chips as something that people would want to buy online, and how did you even start creating them?
Yeah, so at the time I was in the internet industry, and I saw the early stages of internet marketing, essentially like pay-per-click marketing, which a lot of people associate with like Google AdWords today. Like we were doing that in 2000. There was another site called goto.com, and that's basically how it helped build. I was a business development guy at our at antmini.com, and we were paying $0.01 a click, to bring in traffic. And literally a few months before, we were paying $30,000 a month to buy banner ads, right? And so, magazine ads and stuff like that. So I saw the transition. All of a sudden, you can get for $1,000 a month, we could get what we were getting for $30,000 a month a couple months before, and probably $500,000 a month 6 months before. And I saw that change. And then part of my job was we were this portal, so we had to sell internet advertising to our the radiology companies, the MRI companies, the CT scan companies, and explain to them why they should advertise on our website. So we were using internet advertising to build this company, and then we were trying to pitch this idea, which nobody would really understand for about 5 or 6 or 7 years. And so I knew that, and a big part of that was advertising within search engines. So I got really to know search engines really well. And essentially poker chips I had a poker chip game with a buddy, and at the time you could search certain words, and it would tell you how many searches they were getting per month, and very exact information. You can still get this information today, but it's largely obscured. Google realizes they have a monopoly on that, and they're not letting anybody have that information because they want it, because it's very valuable information. So when you can understand exactly what people are searching on and how many searches there are, you basically have a footprint for demand. And then you can just look at supply, and is there enough supply for this demand? And at the time, I was in this sort of group that had a regular poker game, and we were playing with these crappy chips. And I said, why don't we get some of the chips like they have in Vegas? And I went to look for them, and it took 4 to 6 months to get them. And it was just sort of crazy. So there was no supply of these things, and I knew poker was blowing up the time it was going on TV. I knew there was massive demand. So I bought I just made my own custom set of poker chips, very generic style, and started selling those to people. But I would ship them overnight, right? You can get them right away, and poker players are just of that nature that they want stuff right away, and they don't care what it costs. And so it was just instant success, and I couldn't keep up with demand. And really, that was sort of a golden period. That was in 2004 to probably about 2015. It was about a 10-year period where you could really do that. That's kind of how I started the paddleboard business as well. Was I could see there was this huge demand for paddleboards. The supply was, going and buying a paddleboard at a retail store for $1,600. It was insane. We could do direct to consumer, and we sort of took over both those industries.
So a part of it sounds like the trends that you're able to see is a little ahead of the curve. What is it that you have inside that's able to see around the corner before other people can, and get into markets before the market's really there?
I think that's, it's just being in the right place at the right time. In one sense, I'm in San Diego. So you see trends earlier in like Southern California, just than in the rest of the world. So you see that in fashion, you see that in music, you see that in a lot of things. So being in San Diego is helpful. I saw e-bikes. That's another company we've started to. Paddleboards. I can just see them off my deck on the bay. Just there's more paddleboards every day. What's going on? What the hell are these things? And poker was not so much. That was more on TV. But so you can see trends and things, and just being involved in things, being involved in travel. You can go to other parts of the world and bring things from there to here. I think is a big way to spot those trends. But then as far as industry trends, that's largely luck. Like I told you when I graduated, I mean, I really should, have founded a much bigger company at this point, getting out of college in '96 and the grad school in '99. I'm pretty much a failure when I look at like what should have happened with those timing.
Yeah,
it was right place, right time to see the internet marketing. And I've been in this for 25 years now. So yeah. I could really see, like we were doing like Kickstarter type stuff, like 3 or 4 years before Kickstarter existed. And at Amazon, I was very early in Amazon. We got off Amazon in 2017. People are still talking about, you got to start an Amazon business. I'm like, that ship sailed 5 years ago. You do not want to be doing that right now.
Yeah, that's really wild to know that you're able to based on proximity, be able to know where trends can be. I think I look at Silicon Valley and probably very similar, where you can kind of see what's being developed and what are companies building, and why are they doing it, why are they getting funded. They can start to see maybe there's some trends of different things happening. Artificial intelligence, for example, now is kind of a big thing that's come out, but it's been in development for years. So, but about proximity, I think that really is important. So you start off and you get into digital marketing, and you have this poker chip company, and it does well enough to leave your company. And then you get a call, from Shark Tank. Walk us through that, because I'm sure a lot of people know your story, but tell us about how that happened and what that experience was like being on Shark Tank.
Yeah, so that was really with my second business, so Tower Paddleboards. And at that time, so I had some success with the poker chip company. They were sort of dwindling. It was falling away, and I needed to find something else to sort of ride the wave up again. And so I found stand-up paddleboards, and I was being a little more picky at that point. I was like, hey, I've kind of done this. I kind of know what I'm doing. I want to do something that I'm interested in. And so my dream job was to be like the CEO of a surf company, because I'm in San Diego here. And then a buddy took me paddleboarding, and I looked at the stats on the internet of it, and I said, wow, it's a perfect fit, right? This is being the CEO of a surf company. So I was going into something that I wanted to go into. And more importantly, I was going into something where I thought this was a cool product that actually added to people's lives. It got them out in the water with their family and friends. It got them fit. I was getting it for basically fitness. And I had a 4-year-old, 5-year-old at the time, something to do with my son. And I was like, this is a good business. And I can attack this business from a way that actually adds value to the world, right? Like if they're selling paddleboards for $1,200 to $1,600 in a store, and I know down the street you can buy a surfboard for $300, $400, I'm like, this is basically just a big surfboard, right? It shouldn't be that expensive. Something's broken. So that we decided we're going to go direct to consumer and direct to consumer only and sell half-price paddleboards. So I felt like I was creating a business that could add something to the world. And in doing that, the business really exploded because I identified demand, and I was adding something, and people are going to give you their money if you're sort of adding value in a unique way. And so Shark Tank called about 9 months into that business. I had just hired my first employee, maybe 3 months prior, and they just sort of called out of the blue one time, and I'd never even heard of Shark Tank. I thought it was kind of one of these media calls you get, and then you get into the phone call an hour in. They got you all excited about being on TV, and they say, oh, by the way, there's a pre-production fee of $19,000. And you're like, what? I have no money. Why are you guys wasting my time? Goodbye. And so I rudely interrupted the producer of Shark Tank, and I had 40 producers. And I said, I just want to jump ahead here. Like if there's some pre-production fee or this or that, I don't want any time. I'm super busy. We're going into our busy season because it was like June. And he's like, no, Shark Tank. We're on ABC on Friday nights. And I'm like, how have I never heard of this show? It sounds like something I'd be interested in. And I'm like, yes, I'll be on your show. So I, had sent him a video within like a couple days. And then 5 weeks later, I was pitching to the Sharks.
Wow. Now, coming out of that experience, you ended up getting funding from Mark Cuban. And in that experience of getting funding, you really have a big branded individual who's got a lot of visibility on TV and in the business world. And you also get funding from him. What are the pros and what were the cons of that experience?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question because sort of being on Shark Tank and the effect of Shark Tank is kind of a microcosm of entrepreneurship in general. So I went on that show, just randomly something fell in my lap, but it kind of fell in my lap because I had, discovered paddleboards was this trending thing and I was good at search engines. So if you Googled paddleboards, we were at the top. So how do producers of shows look for people to be on their show? They Google paddleboards and they find you. They the same way consumers do. So you actually get a lot of media attention to this. So I did that, got the lucky break. They called, we go up, and I pitch on the show, but of course it's a reality show. I'm known as like the worst pitch in the history of Shark Tank that still landed a deal. I fell apart up there. They started making fun of me. I was like stuttering and stammering, sort of really of a humiliating, performance on TV. But at the end of it, I ended up, getting a deal. I sort of had to, like on the spot, sort of like compose myself and sort of come back. Right. And, and it was really sort of this sort of rocky like turnaround on the show. And I think the TV guys, I obviously like that. They use that as like the lead in for the couple of weeks coming into the show. Like, look at this idiot, he can't even talk. And so, but then we ended up getting a deal with Mark Cuban for $150,000 for 30% of the company. Plus he negotiated for first right of refusal to invest in any business I do in the future, which was a first on Shark Tank. And so then, they invested. It took about 3 or 4 months for the investment to close. And it was a bit of a process, but it aired 9 months later. We didn't really get the huge boom that people would think about from being on Shark Tank. Everybody's like, oh, you've been on Shark Tank, now you're a millionaire in this. No, right. We were on Shark Tank and we had 4 days of sales, which were 15,000 a day. So 60,000 in sales. And then that wave kind of disappeared, right? We were doing 5,000 a day before we went on Shark Tank. So it's not like you get on this TV show and then it's done deal. I mean, it might be if you sell like an app or like a $20 right. item that people see, on TV, and then they, dial it up on their phone and buy. But a $600 paddleboard at the time was not that. And so, but the real benefit came to us was really the press we got around. Because I was in the SEO business, I knew getting links from these powerful press sites was really the value here. When Shark Tank called, I was not really even that interested in raising money or being on the show, but I was like, Jesus, we'll likely get a link from abc.com for this. They'll have to put us on their show. That was the exciting part to me. And we ended up turning that into links in a lot of every newspaper, from my childhood home to where I went to college to university newspapers, whoever I could get that knew me, I wanted them to know that we were on this show and get that link. And that propelled the company from an SEO perspective. And that's really what grew Tower Paddleboard. Now, on a conversion perspective, having Cuban's face, and this is part of what I negotiated with him, have his face on the homepage of the website it became, the company from Shark Tank owned by Mark Cuban, as opposed to Tower Paddleboards, which nobody knew anything. And we were able to ride that for years. Yeah, that's great. I mean, the leverage of that brand, of someone's personal brand, can take a product from obscurity and really make it a global brand, which is, I think, the story, and an incredible one. When you take capital, you have pressure to create profits and also to respond to the people that are investing in you. Did you feel that pressure when you built that partnership with Mark? It wasn't so much pressure. Like when Mark invested, and they didn't even find this out on the show, but I had $105,000 in loans. I had maybe $60,000 in loans from one of my buddies at 65% interest rate, and then another like $40,000 from my brother at a 0% interest rate, because I helped him grow one of his companies. So he was just like, here, you can use my money for a while. And then Cuban found out, like, Jesus, you have 100,000 in loans, you're paying 60, this is craziness. So his 150 basically just went to paying those guys off. And then as soon as we aired, Cuban was like, well, write me back a check for 50 grand. You had a good month. So I wrote him a check. So we basically built the whole thing with no money. So I didn't feel a lot of pressure because especially I felt pressure for getting my brother and my friend their money back. But Cuban I saw more as an opportunity. Like I was like, okay, we've been on this show. Now we got Mark Cuban, put his face on the website. But if we could be, the best company to ever be on Shark Tank or Mark Cuban's best company, then we could ratchet this up into something, more meaningful or more powerful, right? Because then we can really leverage his brand. And also because of the, the negotiated deal on the show, which was his right to invest in future companies, I was kind of like, okay, if I really knock it out of the park for him on this one, I have my money guy for, any other, investment I want to do down the road. So it wasn't pressure in sort of a negative way. It was like, okay, you've got an opportunity here. So, and what ended up happening is, he basically put in 150,000, got his 50,000 back. So his investment was kind of 100,000. And then we cashed him out in dividends over $1 million over about the next 5 years.
Wow. Great deal for him. You're doing all the work, but also a great deal for you for launching your company and the brand. And so you go from stand-up paddleboards. For people that don't know, what's the process of taking an idea and building that product? Like, where do you start building a product that you have to get raw materials from different parts of the U.S., maybe internationally? How did you know where to even start?
Well, with the poker chip company, was sort of my first experience in like some product-based business. And so I wanted the poker chips that were in the Vegas casino. So we went to Vegas and found the manufacturers for those. And there was only like 2 in the world. So we found those manufacturers, talked them into making stuff for us, and they were already making it. They just put a different label on it. So it's essentially private labeling poker chips, which is, where a lot of businesses come from today, because today almost everything is made in China, right? And so even in the poker chip business, I wanted a low-end poker chip. So I went to China, got them to private label one, started shipping poker chips in volume over here for a low-end line from China. And that's sort of where I really started to learn about how cheap things were in China. Like, you can get like a hat that sells for $20 here, and it's like $1.28. And that's a crappy hat. You want the really good hat? That's $1.49. And and people in the U.S. think like the $20 hat, a little better than the $10. No, they're all the same price. They're all super cheap, and all the price you're paying on anything is basically what somebody makes up, or it's all in the distribution channel. Like with the paddleboards being, $1,200 to $1,600, had nothing to do with the paddleboard cost $250, $300 to make. It had to do with getting you that paddleboard and the marketing and all of the nonsense in the business, right? Anyway, so I learned sort of private labeling stuff in China, and with the paddleboards, of course, we were in hardboards initially. And so we were in San Diego here. There's a bunch of surfboard shapers. So we said, well, we got to get a paddleboard with a good shape. What's on the market? What do we do? What's our design? And we had local shapers, like, put these boards together. And we said, like, look, we're going to take this design and we're going to take it to China. So you tell me whatever you want. This is not going to be a long-term business, but I'll pay you very well to basically prototype for us here in the US. And so we did that. We got the design files, sent it over to China. And it wasn't really send it over to China and just sort of like, I never traveled to China, but there was a site at the time. It's called panjiva.com. This is another one of those things where there was this golden age of where you could use these tools and information that was freely available or cheaply available to start businesses. That's all been locked down now. I mean, you can't really do that anymore. It doesn't work so good. But at the time, Panjiva, you could see like containers of goods, where they started from, where they ended. It was all public information due to 911, right? Or 9/11. And so you could search this database and say, I want to see, poker chips. And it would say, okay, well, here's the 4 factories in the world that make poker chips, and here's where they're sending them to. And you can track all this stuff over time and, volume and different brands. So you can even zero in on a brand. Well, where are they getting their stuff made? Zero in on a factory and say, who are they producing stuff for? So it was this magical information that existed, and you were not only finding somebody who could make you poker chips, but you were getting a quality score where their shipments going up or down. Did they provide for good brands or bad brands? And were they losing customers? Were they gaining customers? So you could basically zero in on a good factory, and then you could write them a $50,000 check and know that you weren't just sending that to some scam artist in China. So that's what we did with the poker chips. And I'd already kind of gone through that, so I was able to do that very quickly with the paddleboards. And then we went into inflatable paddleboards. We actually introduced the inflatable paddleboard to the market. Like on Shark Tank, if you'll see there's this board on the floor, it was our first prototype of a 6-inch thick inflatable paddleboard. And they went from basically 1% of the market to today, well over 90% of the market are these inflatables. But because at the time they were 4-inch thick inflatables, and they were just crappy things. Like, you know, you're a surfer, so you know, like the inflatable surfboards, you take that to Costa Rica or something, and it's easy to pack, but it's a crappy surfboard, right? That's where inflatable paddleboards came from initially, was they were these thin, crappy things. We said, screw it, we'll make them thicker, and that will make them better, and it did. And that's what we introduced basically on Shark Tank, and they didn't even talk about it on Shark Tank, or they didn't air any of the stuff that we talked about on that. But that was the introduction of inflatable paddleboards to the world.
That's incredible. So you actually created a new category for stand-up paddleboards, and it's 90% of the market now. Now, you created a category, and I know you're good in observing trends. Your proximity in the beach community is really good. At one point, or at what point did you say, look, we need to grow the company, we need to grow the brands, we need to look at new products? And what were the products that you added to your portfolio that, again, maybe took the same model and said, hey, maybe we can make this better, different, cheaper, more cost effective, whatever it is? What's the Tower brand look like today, and what are the products that you are selling into the market?
Yeah, so really the backstory on that is I'd gone through this poker chip company, right, where it just ramped up. And like my son was born in 2004, 6 months after I jumped out of my day job into that. And the month he was born was the biggest month ever. I made more in that month than I'd ever made in a year in, you know, my prior life.
That's
and
wild.
I was basically reading, like, you know, magazines about yachts, you know, in the delivery room there. And I was just thinking, okay, this is easy. I'm retired now. This is great. I figured this thing out. And that was the peak of it. And then it just sort of slowly started to come down. And that's why, you know, 6 years later, I ended up starting paddleboards, because it almost completely disappeared. It was 1/10 of what it was at the height. And that's because something's introduced online, everybody sees what you're doing, they copy it, it becomes a commodity. Everything gets commoditized online. So when we found the paddleboards, I mean, we weren't even one of the early companies in there selling paddleboards. There were a bunch of brands that were sort of jockeying for position, that were already in the surf or windsurf industry. We came in and did it a little differently. We went direct to consumer. But I knew we were kind of early, and we sort of rode this wave, but I had no qualms that this was going to do the exact same thing as the poker chips. It would peak up and then it would start to come down. But this one was much bigger than the poker chips. So you start believing, you know, drinking your own Kool-Aid, and you think, no, I really have hit it this time. Like, now I'm going to retire. And the same thing happened. Just when you think that's going to happen, all of a sudden it levels off and starts to go back down. So but I knew going in, we're going to diversify. So a couple of years before that happened, I said, you know, and my sort of the dream was to be this CEO of a surf company, right? It wasn't just to run a paddleboard company because I like paddleboarding. It was, you know, and I know the surf shops around here, they sell clothing, right? So the paddleboards were sort of the tip of the spear into this larger beach lifestyle brand. So that was always the plan. It's just, when can we get enough money to do the rest of this? So we, maybe about 2014, 2015, we launched a sunglass company. We launched surfboards, we launched skateboards, we launched snorkel equipment. We did beach cruisers. You know, we had about 25 of these categories, and I was pitching this to Cuban. We did a follow-up show called Beyond the Tank, where we, you know, went up and visited Amazon, and we did this huge deal with Amazon, and they filmed it all it was just like a Shark Tank follow-up show. And, but part of that show was me unveiling these 25 categories that we were going to go to. And there was even, like, you know, Tower Hotels and Tower Airline and Tower this and Tower everything, right? And so, and Cuban was like, this is insanity, like, focus. So that never really transpired. We did start the sunglass company. We did make surfboards, skateboards, but then none of those really hit. Because, like I said, the world had kind of changed a little bit, and what we were doing in 2010 and certainly in 2004 was not working so well anymore. And we didn't really have a huge product, and I was kind of trying to force it. But then we stumbled on one that was actually really big. So that was electric bikes. So we started Tower Electric Bikes, and the electric bike market is just booming right now. But it's a different world today. It's much harder to land these. Sort of the monopolistic tendencies that exist in the online world have now taken full root. And so this sort of the golden period of entrepreneurship online is gone, and it hasn't been here for 4 or 5 years. And so now it's turned into this, into a world really where it's all controlled by, Google and Amazon and, Facebook, and basically all these efficient markets with commoditized products. All of the profit from that goes to these 3 companies. And then who becomes the bigger brand right now is who raises the most money, and then who's willing to lose the most money the fastest to grow their brand in hopes that at some point they don't have to pay these monopolies, and then they have something after that, which they don't. And so you had this whole direct-to-consumer thing happen in the last, probably 10 years. We started Tower Paddleboards, direct-to-consumer paddleboards, the same year Warby Parker started, direct-to-consumer eyeglasses. So that was the big trend, and it seemed to be working. There's very few of those brands left. There's a lot of just sort of blood in the water. And now we're sort of a small company struggling, and we're having to shift our focus because we were always direct to consumer. We're going to sell half-price paddleboards. This is what we're going to do. But now, the free ride's over. You can't be found doing that model. You have to, be willing to pony up. Are you going to pay, Google or Amazon, $1 million a year, $2 million a year, $3 million a year in advertising to be found, right? And we didn't do that. And we sort of were holding out that the world has changed, and all of a sudden you have globalization has made stuff cheap, right? So if you can make shoes for $4 in, India, you can actually sell them for $10 in America because everybody is one click away from the maker. But the reality is all the middlemen disappeared in sort of the onset of the internet. But now these larger middlemen, which is, Google and Amazon, have taken up, that vacuum, created these monopolies. And now all of a sudden that $4 shoe is still $120. Maybe it's even $150 now. And so consumers have basically, now we're back to retail. There's no advantage to consumers of globalization. And so it's just, we're spending more money on advertising now, where it used to be you were spending that money on your retail channel, of developing this retail channel. So it's really a weird world we're in right now, and a tough one for online brands to survive. Whereas like Tower Paddleboards is fairly healthy, and we can survive because we can get our costs down and we have an established brand. But I'm trying to build the same thing with Tower Electric Bikes, and it's virtually impossible today to do that starting from scratch. And we even can piggyback off of our other brand, but it's just very difficult to do.
Yeah. So if you're an entrepreneur out there and you're looking to start a company and you have an idea and it's going to be a product you might create, develop on your own and bring to market, what advice would you give to that individual that, is trying to break into a new market or maybe bring a new product into market without really knowing what that road's going to look like today?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure that a product business is good. I think a lot of people think of that, like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to create some product. Even in the businesses that we didn't really create some new product. I mean, we kind of did with the inflatable paddleboards. We just improved what was existing because it worked better for our model. But really what we innovated on was the distribution. We went direct to consumer only. We just said the distribution channel of selling stuff through retail and having distributors and salespeople and all of this nonsense that makes a $300 surfboard, $1,600. That's insane. We're just going to sell this, mail it to the person. So we disrupted distribution. We didn't change the product at all, right? Our products were quality, but there weren't any crazy innovations on these products. So even then, I don't know that just coming out with a fancier widget was the thing. But today, I would say that's definitely not the thing to do, because you're basically going to launch into a category, and you're going to create this product. It's going to get knocked off by 100 Chinese. Like today, if you Google, not Google, but if you look for paddleboards on Amazon, the first 50 results are brands that you can't even pronounce. It's just all Chinese, the non-brands. So that's what's coming for you, right? If you start a product business. And then on the other side of that, you're going to have, like in the paddleboard industry, I'd say we're one of the top 4 brands in the industry now. The other 3 were all acquired by, in the last 2 years, by basically like, hedge fund type businesses, billion-dollar corporations, just money people, just sort of aggregating all of these things. And then they're going to go out there and spend, millions on advertising and then get that stuff into retail stores. And they're going back to the old model. So trying to like start as like a small entrepreneur, I don't think it's really going to happen. I would focus on service-based businesses. I would focus on things that can't be affected by the online monopolies until this whole thing gets sorted out, and can't be affected by globalization that, China can make it cheaper than you. For example, Tower, and one of the other pivots that we did here during this whole, we were looking at other things to go into, and also cost cutting to get our costs down so we could sort of make ourselves anti-fragile to survive the sort of shakeout of the online world. We opened a beach club here in San Diego. It's our offices. It was an old kayak shop. We basically renovated it, turned it into this 4,500 square foot event space, and started renting it for, corporate cocktail parties and weddings and stuff like that. That's doing really well. That's a protectable business for a small business. I mean, that's like, our cash cow now. And the other is just see if you can survive, or can you lose, a couple $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 a year for 10 years and hold on to that business. And maybe, the craziness will change in the online world. But yeah, I think the opportunities are really these offline businesses now. Another business we started was an e-bike repair shop, just fixing e-bikes, because you have, 1 million e-bikes coming into the market every year and nobody wants to work on them. And they're just going from purchase to the dump, right? And if you can fix those, so again, that's an offline defensible business. And a lot of these businesses aren't like super sexy when people are thinking about starting businesses. But I think, in my opinion, those are the opportunities right now.
Those are also
don't require a ton of money.
Yeah, they don't, and also it's sometimes, I don't want to use the word boring, but it sometimes is the one that can get you through the down markets, and you can build a sustainable business. So I think that's really a smart way to diversify. If you look at products to services, or products that aren't necessarily only consumer focused items. Talk to me just a little bit about the Tower space you have there, the beach club. So where's the focus, and how much of that is online marketing to get visibility? Because you're competing against, hotels and other organizations that have been in San Diego for a long time, but you're seeing success. Like, what have you been able to do that's carved out a little niche there in that market? I mean,
I don't know. Some of this may have been luck, but we have a waterfront event space in San Diego, which there just aren't a lot of them. So you have very few competition, and then most of your competition is hotels, right? And you want to throw a wedding at a hotel, you're going to spend $50,000, $80,000 on that thing, right? Because they're going to force you to buy their drinks and their food and stuff like that. We just rent the event space for, we rent it for the month for $8,500, and we rent it out for the day, between about $3,000 and about $8,000 a day. And
wow.
So just an incredible economics on the business. It's, you're making people happy, you're having weddings. We kind of did this, and we got into this because we needed an office, and we figured, how do we collect rent instead of paying rent? So that was the idea. We'll office in the back, we'll have a pop-up retail in the shop, and then when somebody wants to throw an event, we thought we'd have a couple of these a month, we'll push everything into the back room, and we'll, let them do their event, and we'll have free rent, right? Well, it turned into, like, the event business is an incredible business. I mean, like, you're just an idiot doing this, like, online stuff. This is crazy. We had just been a total flip-flop over the last 10 years, right? And and the marketing of it is easy. It's kind of like in the early days of the paddleboard business, where, we had half-price paddleboards, and they were at the top of the search engines. So what we engineered there was our value proposition was incredible compared to the competition, and we made that visible. So in the event space, we have an incredible value proposition on a beautiful space, and we've simply made it visible. If you get the product right, and your distribution of the product right, the marketing just takes care of itself. And a lot of people think it's completely opposite of that. Like, they're just like, I'm this marketing genius, I need to figure out the marketing of it, and then, we got to make a product and we do this. No, the design of your product and your value proposition, that's like 95% of the game. You do that, and any idiot can market this thing. that's sort of my experience in this world over the last 20 years.
Wow, that's incredible. So Tower Beach Club is a place that if you're going to get married or have any type of an event, is a place to check out. It's on the water in San Diego. Now, where do you go from here? You've had product companies, direct to consumer, space on the water. It sounds like there's trends that are out there that are still evolving that if you want to take some risk and get into, you can. I mean, I know that the electric bike industry is, I mean, we're out of Southern California as well, and it's incredibly lucrative in the Orange County area and LA markets as well. Like, where do you see your brand going forward?
Yeah, so I mean, that's the thing. In a lot of these trends or industries that you see now, it's like you can see them growing, but are they making money? That's the question now. Like the e-bike market is, tremendous growth. We had 500% growth in during the pandemic, but we were kind of break even, losing money, and then it tailed off, and then we were losing a lot of money there. There's the big companies that raised huge amounts of money. They had there was one company, Rad Power Bikes. They had like a $1.5 billion valuation, right? And that was 16 months ago, and now they've fired 80% of their staff, and they're probably not worth $100 million. And it's like, you can't just go lose money forever. And what's happening now with the economy is all of these investors that were chasing these sort of crazy dreams are drying up. Those companies are not able to raise them, so you have to prove profitability. And I think you're already seeing the early stages of this, but my guess is in the next 2-3 years, it's going to be something like you really haven't seen in a lot of people's lifetime that I'm employing. Is we're going to see really these dark period of years where businesses are just going under. So you have to find something that is not only growing, but you can do it profitably and sustain yourself. So that's really the focus at Tower today, and that's why we've done these offline diversifications to our online diversifications, because during the pandemic, they closed down events. So the event venue went to zero. The e-commerce business went really good, and then especially the outdoors, bikes, and that went great. And then you had this sort of big boom of everybody bought that stuff. The pandemic was over, those dropped off, and the event venue went up because nobody'd been out for a long time. So these diversifications are working nicely, but it's still, we're under very stressed times right now. And so our goal over the next 5 years is survival. You survive to live another day, and whoever survives, those are going to be the companies that can do well. So yeah, it's all about survival for us right now.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think a lot of what you're sharing is innovation and pivoting and to diversify where you need to, but also marketing. I mean, innovation and marketing, I think, are the keys to success in business, whatever business you're in. It seems like you're continually able to kind of do that, look around and take some risks, but diversify is a key. I mean, I go back to proximity. I think that's such a big part of business too. And, you look at the Midwest, you have automotive, you look at Northern California, Silicon Valley, Southern California is, action wear and different types of sports and whatnot. But as an entrepreneur, I always believe that the freedom is the essence of what we do. It gives you the opportunity to decide what you want to build, how you want to do it, what space you want to be in, and make changes if you need to make changes. And it's really up to you to figure out how to do it. But shows like this that can give insights to others that are in the process of building something or innovating or surviving, I think is incredibly helpful. And, I just want to kind of leave with one thing here. The startup story and the startup founder story is incredibly important. I think in business, it tells you about the person who's behind the brand, and also allows you to connect with that person and just hearing their story. They've done a lot of studies on happiness, and oftentimes it's not the outcome or the destination where you're trying to get to. Many times it's that journey, that experience of going through it. And part of that experience is progress, which leads to happiness. So in your career now, spanning 20 plus years in doing what you do, what has been the progress you've seen individually as an entrepreneur and then the progress you've seen currently in your company that you look at and you say, this has made me feel pretty good and happy in my experience?
Yeah, I think you're nailing on a good note there, and this is a note that entrepreneurs really have to internalize. And I talked about earlier, entrepreneurship being really like traveling, right? It's this adventure you go on. You plan the trip, you go on the trip. You're off there for months. You're going to meet all these people. You're going to come back. The trip's going to be over, right? That is entrepreneurship in a nutshell. And on that trip, inevitably, there's going to be horrible things happening, right? And when those horrible things happen, it seems like this is horrible. This is going to ruin my trip or whatever. But when you come back, those are the things that you actually remember. So those are the most memorable. The hardest times you're going through are the most memorable. So after you've done a few of these trips, you start to be able to realize, I'm in the horrible part, right? But this is actually going to be the most memorable. And you can flip the script on that. And as an entrepreneur, if you can't figure out how to do that, you're not going to survive. So this was like when I went on Shark Tank and I, made an ass out of myself, and I'm in there for 5 minutes. I'm stuttering and stammering. My presentation is off. The sharks are making fun of me. I had to, in the moment, say, oh, this is going to be one of those memorable moments where this will probably make everything great. And I'm going to remember that I did that. I'm not going to remember the rest of the presentation or how I felt or whatever, but I'm going to know this. And if you can flip that switch in your mind, that's how you can, succeed to the next day. And in Tower, we've been around for 12 years, we've gone through a number of these. I mean, the roller coasters that you go on as an entrepreneur, I mean, it's not for everybody. And it's not this like rosy, like, oh, I got my free time and I've got all this money. No, it's sleepless nights. It's, we've gone almost bankrupt, once. I just sold my house last week to try to survive, keep this company to survive, for a couple more. You could lose everything at all times. But now I'm able to say, this is one of those really like hard times that this might be the death blow to us. But who cares? It's the adventure we were on and the people that you were on that adventure with, because that's what you walk away from. And I think once you can do that, then you're unsinkable, right?
Yeah.
They can take everything from you, but they can't take that away from you. And once you have that opinion, you're invincible.
Yeah, no, it's great. I love the attitude. I think the grit comes from the experience. If somebody wants to visit Tower, your spacing there in San Diego, or find Tower Paddleboards online, where can they go to find you?
Yeah, so we're still fairly decent in the search engines, even though mostly advertising on there these days. But Tower Paddleboards, or you can just Google anything paddleboards, and then towerelectricbikes.com. So towerpaddleboards.com, towerelectricbikes.com, and towerbeachclub.com. We're fairly easy to find.
Perfect, great. Stephan, I've known you for a long time, not just somebody who's an entrepreneur, but a friend. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch up on our next episode. But thanks for joining here today. Take it easy.
Thanks for having me on, Jake.
Before we wrap up, I want to give a big shout out to all the entrepreneurs that have joined to make this podcast possible, and for all the listeners for listening. It means the world to me that you chose to spend your time with us today. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now, but can't wait to connect with you all soon on the next episode. Take care. This show is sponsored by Match Relevant, a company that helps venture-backed startups find the best people in the market, and they do it in 3 simple steps. First, they sit down with founders to understand their story. Second, they tell their story into multiple candidate channels. And third, they schedule interviews within 48 hours. Find us at matchrelevant.com to learn more about how we do it.